LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Justice Secretary has blamed human error for the mistaken release of an asylum seeker convicted of sexual assault. David Lammy has confirmed there will be an independent investigation into how Hadish Kabatu was freed instead of being deported. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick says Mr Lammy should be ashamed.
His officials, briefing the press, called it the mother of all... Yeah, they're not wrong, are they? Calamity Lammy strikes again. It's a national embarrassment.
Turkey has signed a deal to buy 20 British-made Typhoon fighter jets worth up to £8 billion. The Ministry of Defence says it secures thousands of jobs. Nigel Farage says he won't take any further action against a Reform UK MP who complained of adverts full of black and Asian people. The party leader says the comments by Sarah Pochin were ugly. And the King has been heckled as he visited Lichfield Cathedral over the controversy around his brother Prince Andrew. Anti-monarchy group Republic shared a video of a man asking him how long he'd known about Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 8 points at 96.53. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.14. LBC weather, rain continuing to sweep eastwards tonight, patchier across the south, rain clearing for central parts later, lows of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. I want to start tonight with 2 names. The first is Eliza Armstrong. Remember, Eliza, we will come back to her. The second is William Thomas Stead. He was a crusading Victorian journalist. There's a modest green plaque to his memory on a house round the corner from this studio. These names are relevant to tonight's news when you'll hear about so-called grooming gangs and child prostitution in London. Perhaps a warning is called for. Well, it's an old warning. 150 years ago, Stead warned readers of his paper, the Pall Mall Gazette, all those who are squeamish and those who are prudish and all those who would prefer to live in a fool's paradise of imaginary innocence and purity, selfishly oblivious to the horrible realities of the London inferno, should, he said, avoid his newspaper. Well, across London tonight, and the UK generally, that inferno is still burning hot. Stead shocked Britain when he revealed the rape and trafficking of so-called fresh girls in the 1880s. With a courageous fellow campaigner called Josephine Butler, he managed to get Parliament to raise the age of consent from 13 to 16. But to demonstrate the reality of child prostitution in the capital, Stead bought a 13-year-old girl, Eliza Armstrong, for £5 from her alcoholic mother. The establishment, which preferred these things to be covered up, was horrified, and Stead was sentenced to jail. He was later nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his anti-war campaigning, and he died on the Titanic after giving his life jacket to another passenger. I tell his story because it seems that the old nightmare of child prostitution is back and as bad as ever. The Met Police is late in the day reviewing thousands of cases in the capital. It isn't just London, of course not. We know about Rotherham and Rochdale, and just today, a Romanian gang was jailed for raping and abusing 10 women in my hometown, Dundee. But in London, a modern-day Stead, Jon Wedger, a retired detective who says he was told to stop investigating the cases of 50 children who'd been groomed and sexually abused, is continuing the work the Victorian campaigners started. And he's followed the abusers and he's talked to victims and warned of the dangers of a political cover-up. And he's with me now. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can I start off by asking whether you think things are as bad as I was suggesting there, that there are serious gangs, there's a great deal of child prostitution going on in London right now all around us?
Of course. And I'll stand testimony to that because I made my claims before, like you just said about the 50 kids. I went out with an investigative journalist, only a week ago onto the streets of London. Within 90 minutes, we found a girl that had been working since she was 14, and then we're given information about 3 other children and one was 12 years old that was working that night on the street of the East End of London. So it hasn't changed at all.
That's a horrible, horrible thought that these so-called fresh girls are still out there. Is what's going on in London very similar or different to what happened in Rochdale and Rotherham in terms of grooming gangs of mainly Asian men?
It's different. The ethnicity or makeup of so-called grooming gangs is as representative as the diversity of London. London is the most diverse city in the world. And what we had on these provincial, mainly northern towns, was it Kashmiri, Pakistani gangs that were doing it mainly to white girls. In London, we had every single ethnicity. We had Jamaican Yardis were involved in it, Albanians, Kosovans, Lithuanians. In fact, I got the first prosecution of anyone under the amended Sexual Offences Act for sexual exploitation. We used to work under the old legislation, and it was a white British woman, and she was pimping out many, many kids. So and the same as the victims. They weren't just white kids. There were Somalian girls, there were boys, there were Indian girls, there were Polish girls. It was so mixed.
It is absolutely horrible. And Jon, you were in the Vice Squad back in the day, and you started to pursue these kinds of cases, and you were told to stop. Yeah. How did that happen, and why do you think you were told to stop?
It was on more than one occasion, but to précis this, one night I'm out on vice patrols in the King's Cross area, a very violent area, which was what was known as a front line, crack cocaine being sold. It was, a lot of street crime. And one of the street prostitutes told me, look, Jon, when your team goes home, the girls come out. If you come here after 2 o'clock in the morning in this particular area, it was off the Caledonian Road, there will be a very, very young girl. So the next night I did as I was instructed, and I picked up a girl. She was 13, 14 years old, and she was about that big. She had HIV/AIDS, and she was addicted to crack cocaine and heroin. I picked her up, I put her in the car under what's known as a police protection order to take her to a place of safety, not to prosecute her. I radioed it through to my control room. I was told, get rid of her, she's got scabies.
Oh, God.
I then had information of a young girl, again 13, 14 years old, that had been taken off the street because she was involved in this criminality. And she was placed into a care home in Cambridgeshire. I went up to see her. And the reason I was sent up there wasn't to take her testimony. I was told, my briefing was, tell her to shut up, because she kept making allegations that she was being pimped out.
Tell her to shut up. Why?
Because she kept making allegations that she was being pimped out. I went to see her.
Why would that be a problem? I mean, the police are supposed to stop this.
Of course, you wouldn't have thought so. That was, my mindset. So I went to see her. She said, I'm not lying. It's happening to me. And there's other girls. Jon, there's other girls. So she gave me the name of another girl. I saw her. She was even smaller and younger. And she gave me the name of 2 more girls. And in the end, they ranged from 9 to 14 years old.
9?
Yeah, and they were being pimped out on the street. There were many people that were the client list. They ranged from all different stratas and classes in society that were utilising these girls. I brought this to the attention of my senior officer, the commanding officer for the Vice Unit, and I was told, what you've done is you potentially effed us, we know what that means, past, present and future. This must not and will not ever get out. If you mention a word of this outside the room, this is verbatim, you will lose your home, your job and your children. Shut the F up. You have no idea who or what you're dealing with.
I'm finding myself feeling mildly sick as I listen to you, and I'm sure an awful lot of people listening to the show will feel the same. Do you think this was purely because the police didn't want the politicians, didn't want, as it were, the entire political establishment embarrassed by what was going on? They prefer to look the other way?
What you understand, and I'll give you another strand of it in a minute as well, what you understand is criminality is usually the reserve, what the police tend to deal with, the bread and butter stuff of the lower and the working classes. It's dishonest and disorderly criminality, which presents itself. But when you're dealing with sex crimes, you're dealing with people that are emotionally broken, so it does not know any boundaries. So this is where paupers know kings. It will transgress. It's like a hot knife through the build-up of society.
There will be famous, powerful people found on the streets of London with young girls.
And there were. Now, I was removed from the Vice Unit. I went on to the Child Protection Unit. I went on to London Borough of Haringey. My commanding officer's parting words were me. He put his hand out and he said, you must never, ever look into this again. On my first day in the Child Protection Office, I asked them, did they have any cases of child prostitution, as we called it. I'm not endorsing the term, but that's how we called it. I was told no, but there is a job, side issue, ancillary to your normal work, where you can go to meetings about this problem. Mm-hmm. The last girl that did it, she did it for 2 years. She never found one case in 2 years and said, actually, it's a good DOS, because once you've had a strategy meeting, you can sod off home. So I said, OK, let me do it. So I got a list straight away of the children's homes. There was something like 26 care homes in this London borough. And this is almost a timescale. I got the first kids home, dialed it up, and I said, look, Jon Wedger, detective. I said, how many children have you got? The average was about 4 to 5. The guy said, we got 3 kids. How many of them do you lose at the weekend to crime? And he went, what sort of crime? I said, well, prostitution. I said, well, out of the 3, we lose 2. The next one, I rang up. There were 6 children. He said, we lose 5 of them, boys and girls.
The interesting thing about this is it's almost verbatim from what Steed was finding in the 1880s in London, you know, and he was saying then, why aren't people making a fuss? Why do MPs not want to talk about it? Why can't anyone hear the screams of the children? They thought it was in the back streets. No one is listening. No one wants to know. Can I ask you something about, because, you know, we know these terrible crimes happen not just around Asian gangs and not just in particular urban centres, but, you know, in grand cathedrals, in schools and elsewhere. Do you think that anywhere men are allowed to be in charge of children and there is no oversight at all, terrible things happen?
Yes, and that was proven with the care home of Shirley Oaks, where at one period of time there was 19 known registered offenders or convicted offenders that were working in this care home, males that were working in there, you know, almost unvetted. And there was a look, someone did a look into this thing, and they found that there was an increasing amount of children were abused, mainly boys, in care homes under left-wing constituents more than right-wing constituents, because under diversity laws and equality laws, they were not looking into the background of some of the male applicants. And so
this is going on everywhere,
yeah.
And we know there's politicians of all sorts of different stripes involved, and we have to be very careful here. But you would believe that child prostitution and so-called grooming gangs, because they're really rape gangs, are operating all around us, probably in London, probably almost every other centre around the UK, and it is still the case that councillors, maybe members of Parliament, police officers, do not want us to talk about it.
They don't want us to talk. I was, like I said, a senior officer threatened me. And also when I brought I held a strategy meeting, and I got all concerned parties. So I got the social services, non-governmental organisations that all purport to look after children involved. I invited them. I put my findings to them, and I was told by the head of safeguarding for children for that borough, what the F have you done? We now have to put in emergency care plans for every single kid. I said, but you knew these were kids that were potentially at risk. And they said, yeah, but while they're out doing that, they don't come to notice.
I think Charles Dickens will be turning his grave as well.
Of course, yeah.
Jon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much
for that testimony.
Appreciate it.
And listening to it was Baroness Gohir, who leads the Muslim Women's Network and has been critical of the culture of violent misogyny in parts of northern Pakistan. Baroness, thank you. You've heard what we just heard. Absolutely shocking and outrageous. You've been particularly focusing on the culture of some of the Asian or Pakistani gangs who've come in. And it's a mixture of religion and it's a mixture of local culture and patriarchy, I suppose. Just explain.
So I did some research in 2013 and I focused on South Asian girls and the victims were Pakistani, Bangladeshi, but also I found Somali girls as well and Afghan girls. And what I found was that sexually deviant behaviour, it wasn't one single factor, it was multiple of factors, starting off with organised crime, class. There was a lot of class prejudice, there's lack of empathy for whether it's white working class girls or whether it's Pakistani working class girls. But within that, I also did look at culture. I thought, well, how does, for some men, culture play a role? And some of the perpetrators had moved to this country, and they're coming from cultures, and I don't want to, this not stereotyping all Pakistani men, by the way, or Bangladeshi men. They're coming from cultures where, for example, they probably thought it's okay to have sex with a girl once she's reached puberty, and there's a lot of misogyny and patriarchy. And then obviously some of the perpetrators are British born, and if they're hanging around with such people, and then obviously that culture then. So I think it was quite a complex mixture, but I would say a lot of it was around access and vulnerability, just exploiting. So if they could access white girls, they'll access white girls. If they can access Pakistani girls or Bangladeshi girls, they will do so. And I found that if they had 6 or 7 girls, each person was making £3,000 to £4,000 a week. But the clients who were paying to have sex with these children were men of all backgrounds, of all professions, including white men.
Really interesting. And you were worried, I think, certainly have been worried in the past, that in this kind of big national conversation, which I think is just beginning around this subject, I kind of feel we're in the early stages of the national debate about what's being done to children in this country. Pakistani or brown girls in particular are kind of pushed to one side. They're less keen they're less prepared to come forward and, as it were, perhaps shame the family, shame the community, and they're more vulnerable to manipulation by these men.
So, yeah, their experiences, voices are hidden because it's difficult for them to come forward because of the culture of shame and honour. So when, for example, their families did find out, some of the girls were being forced into marriage or taken abroad to Pakistan or Bangladesh, so that they find it very difficult to speak out because of that culture and shame and honour. And I think we need to try and ensure, if there's an inquiry, those voices also get heard. And I think if victims are going to be at heart of this, we've got to be hearing from all kinds of victims of all backgrounds. And I think also some of this is starting in schools, so we forget. So some of these older men are paying boys in schools. They're saying, here's an iPhone, can you find who the vulnerable girls are in school? And then they'll introduce them to the older men. So I think we need to look at schools. I'm really, really disappointed in the police and the social services because of their inaction and lack of empathy for, poor working class children. There's a class prejudice here. They didn't take action, it escalated, but now they're trying to hide behind this. Oh, we didn't speak out because we were worried about it being accused of racism. That can't be true, because if you look at the prison population, 18% are Muslim in prison. So if there was any racism, there wouldn't be so many Muslims in prison. And I think they're trying to hide behind that as their failures. In fact, some of the girls were saying police were involved. They were actually going to have sex with these girls.
That's absolutely horrifying. So you more or less agree with with Jon's description of what's going on. In terms of what happens next, clearly, one way or another, we have to have a really big national row about this. There needs to be a lot more anger, even than there has been so far. What do you think about the idea that Nigel Farage came up with today of saying there should be a fast parliamentary inquiry? MPs should now lead this.
I don't think MPs should lead this, because I think there's going to be... This should not be used as a political football.
Sure.
I think we need to have a good chair that's going to put the victims at the centre of this, that people have trust and confidence in that person. And I think we need to look at everything. We need to look at the role of the police, the social services, actually government, and the decisions that were made. Lack of police resources as well in this. And I think how some of these cases were handled. But also what we found was 1/3 of in the South Asian girls, 1/3 were sexually abused in the family home. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the, for example, South Asian perpetrators, and that's probably the same for all perpetrators, they are also abusing in the family home. That goes unchecked, unchallenged. Then it spills over into, well, let's actually sexually abuse girls outside of the family home. So they probably also need to look at that as well.
So you think the British state, the British establishment, the British police have been too squeamish to go into South Asian communities and actually ask the right questions, and by doing that they have betrayed girls?
I think all of us should be asking questions. And when I did my report, we had a roadshow up and down the country, and a lot of people saying, well, South Asians aren't challenging these Pakistani grooming gangs. We had roadshows across the country, including in Bradford, where men and women were speaking out, saying this should not be happening in our community. So I think we all need to be involved.
And the Asian Women's Network is Muslim Women's Network is going to start to lead that now.
Well, we've been talking about it since 2013, and by the way, we still get cases on our Muslim Women's Network helpline, still till this day.
Absolutely horrendous. All right, listen, one of the most important conversations we've had. Thank you both very much indeed. Up next, a new law comes into force today, protecting people from terrible living conditions. We'll speak with the father of Awaab, Ishak, whose tragic death sparked these changes. But you're listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr, and the time is now 6:20.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why is there delay?
Straight to the point.
This government is unravelling everywhere you look.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
How can that make sense to anyone?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
Hey, it's me, your dishwasher. I'm sorry about the chaos last night. I think a fork got jammed in my racks. Whoops. Don't even check the bills. I've overdone it. Don't get mad, okay, but I used up lots of power yesterday. Sometimes you just have to blow off some steam.
It can feel like all your energy does is take. But the longer you're with OVO, the more rewards you get. OVO, do energy differently. Beyond customers only, eligibility required, redemption limits apply.
Train to 3 bridges for 2 adults, 1 skeleton and 1 fairy werewolf, as you do. Just 1 pumpkin each, kids! Charlie, not that one, mate. It's nearly as big as you. Back on the train with 2 little monsters and a couple of pumpkins. Now off home to spend a good 3 hours carving. Download the Thameslink Railway app to book kids' tickets for £2 on off-peak journeys. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story.
Switching to Vodafone full fibre broadband is now as easy as pie. Ooh, freshly baked. It's a walk in the park. Hello, little fella. It's like taking candy from a baby. Come on, as if I'd do that. With One Touch Switch, it's easy. We sort everything out for you. We even contact your current provider. Plus, we'll help towards leaving fees. Switch today to full fibre broadband with Vodafone.
Up to £200 credit to cover leaving fees. More information and terms at vodafone.co.uk/broadband.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:22. It would be tempting, wouldn't it, to say that nothing gets better, nobody listens, particularly after some of today's stories. But it ain't true. Today, Awaab's law, which requires landlords and social housing to fix dangerous hazards quickly, comes into effect. It's named after the toddler, Awaab Ishak, who died in 2020 from a breathing illness caused by exposure to the mould in his family's housing association flat in Rochdale. Now, this is a law that will make life a bit less dangerous for many very low-income people all around Britain. Awaab's father, Faisal Abdullah, spoke to me a little bit earlier, and he told me just how bad the conditions in their house were.
Yeah, it was a lot of mold in the kitchen and the bathroom as well, most likely in the bathroom and the living room and the cupboards as well. I was having a lot of mold, and the smell is disgraceful and disgusting. Was a lot of strong smell is coming from the house. And
yeah. And did your little boy become steadily more ill? Could you see a change in him because of this condition?
Yeah, a lot of when they keep the smell and the mold is keep growing in the house, and the most all the time is getting ill and getting cough.
And so after he died, you must have been absolutely traumatized, very upset. What did you do then?
My missus already from before he was passed away, he was thinking about the house and the condition was where we living in, and he just was thinking about that house is gonna just cause all this problem for our son. And we try to complain about different ways, health visitors and the midwives and a lot of and the GB as well, when we always take into the GB and we try to let them know what condition we're living in.
And then after your son died, did you begin a political campaign immediately? Because, it's difficult to get the law changed in this country, and you've had huge success. So why do you think that was? Did you have powerful supporters?
Yeah, I've got a lot of supporters from my legal team. They try to support me, and and the public as well. They're trying to play the biggest part of the law changing as well. The way we just went suffering, and we struggle a lot, and we don't need the other people going the same way we went through.
After a terrible story, it's been a great achievement. Faisal, thank you very, very much indeed for joining LBC tonight and talking to us. Well, to talk more about this and the new Renters' Rights Act, which gives tenants better protection, but is accused of driving up to 1 in 3 landlords out of the sector, let's hear from the housing and social campaigner, Kwajo Tweneboa. Kwajo, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
The law that I was just discussing there is clearly a very important and good moment, but there's a lot of people think it must be extended from beyond social housing and beyond private landlords.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time coming. It's about time that it was brought in. I've been campaigning on a similar issue for the last 5 years in regards to people living in diabolically slum condition within social housing properties, whether that's under local authorities and housing associations. And even today, I was sending emails to local authorities on behalf of people that I know still living in homes with damp and mould. We're talking about millions of people up and down the country. So, I mean, there is a lasting legacy here in regards to Awaab and this change in law. It will go to make sure that what had happened to their family and their child doesn't happen to children up and down the country. But I do absolutely believe that it needs to be extended beyond just social housing. It has to go over to the private rental sector.
Because that's where a lot of the worst housing is.
Yes, and temporary accommodation, which often isn't spoken about. Some of the worst cases I deal with happens to be temporary accommodation and privately rented temporary accommodation too. So I absolutely believe this does need to be extended, and sooner rather than later, to the private rented sector, because people are paying extortionate amounts of money in rent every month and living in appalling, dangerous conditions.
That's for sure. Let me ask you about the new Renters' Rights Act, which has just become law, I think, more or less now.
Yeah.
Now, that is important because that gives renters lots of new rights they hadn't had before. But there is a pushback, obviously, from the landlords, saying a lot of them, this is too much interference, it's too difficult, we're not making enough money anyway, and we're pulling out of the sector. Is there a danger that actually there is a shortage of rental housing, particularly private rental housing, as a result of the Act?
Well, we just simply haven't built enough housing in general. We, as a country, need to build more housing, but particularly social housing. That's what I've been pushing for a very, very long time. I think what we're asking isn't a lot. Tenants aren't asking for a lot. I think we're, in fact, rebalancing the scales here. If a landlord wouldn't live in the conditions that they're renting their homes out in, then no one should be living in those conditions. And I think that should be the baseline in terms of conversation that we're having surrounding this condition, because ultimately, in its worst cases, it costs people's lives, and fundamentally that needs to change. And we're talking about millions of people in the private rented sector living in dangerous conditions. 1.6 million kids living in the private rented sector in homes with damp and mould at the moment. It's not good enough.
Remember that figure, folks, 1.6 million people, children. Kwajo and Tweneboa, thank you very much indeed for that. The release of Hadush Kebatu, an illegal migrant who sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl and was accidentally let out of custody before being recaptured at the weekend, has caused some genuine anger in the Commons this afternoon. Here is the new Justice Secretary, David Lammy, doing his best to be reassuring.
These are the strongest release checks that have ever been in place, and they will apply to every release from custody and are effective immediately.
And here is his shadow, Robert Jenrick, being unimpressed.
Calamity Lammy strikes again. It's a national embarrassment. And today, the Justice Secretary feigns anger at what's happened.
Well, I'm joined now by Cassia Rowland, the senior researcher at the Institute for Government who looks at criminal courts and prisons. Cassia, clearly something quite profound is going wrong here. Yet again, the Home Office is failing. Is this a kind of institutional problem that's going to take years to solve?
I think it is an institutional problem. That doesn't necessarily mean it's got to take years to solve. And in some sense, prisons don't really have years. The state of the system at the moment is so bad, not just in terms of planning for release, which, as we've seen in this case, has been a bit of a disaster, but in terms of violence, drug use in prison, protests. All the metrics are going the wrong way.
Going the wrong way. And there is an argument that these new checks, which are two things, one, necessary, and B, are going to gum things up really badly and will actually make the system work even less well.
I think there is a real risk of that. We don't know exactly what those checks are going to be yet. I think some are probably pretty sensible. Some, like if you have to ask the Ministry of Justice every time you release a high-profile prisoner, that's probably using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, to be honest. But what is really important is that the Ministry of Justice keeps focusing on the root of the problem, which is that the criminal justice system as a whole just can't cope.
It's underfunded. I mean, for years and years and years, under the Tories, prisons desperately needed more money, the court system needed more money, and it was never really allocated. It was pushed to the back of the queue. It wasn't politically important enough. And there is a danger that exactly the same thing is happening under Labour.
I think that is true. There have been significant increases in funding for prisons and courts, and we're expecting those to keep going up. And really importantly, increases in funding for probation, which is often the kind of unloved bit of the criminal justice system, but is really crucial to making a success of the government sentencing reforms.
Absolutely true. Cassia Rowland, thank you very, very much indeed for that. Now, coming up, Nigel Farage has described his colleague Sarah Pochin's comments on representation on television adverts as ugly after the Prime Minister accused her of racism this afternoon. Our political editor put a question to Farage and will be with me in a few minutes. But the time now, 6:31, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The Justice Secretary has confirmed there will be an independent investigation into how an asylum seeker was mistakenly freed from prison. David Lammy has told MPs he's livid on behalf of the public and blamed human error after Hadush Kabatu was released. Nigel Farage says he's unhappy with comments made by a Reform UK MP who said it drives her mad to see adverts full of black and Asian people. The party leader says the remarks were ugly, but he doesn't think Sarah Pochin's intentions behind them were racist. And the King has been heckled over the ongoing controversy around his brother Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. One man shouted at Charles as he greeted crowds outside Lichfield Cathedral earlier. LBC weather, rain continuing to sweep eastwards tonight, patchier across the south, rain clearing for central parts later, lows of 3 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents,
we will be talking Prince Andrew and the apparent demand that he has made to give up Royal Lodge in Windsor. Instead of having one house, he might want 2. One for him, one for Sarah Ferguson. Will that wash? And what does the King do about it?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
For anyone needing assistance when travelling with TfL, such as people with visual or mobility impairments, our Turn Up and Go service has staff on hand to help. It's available at all London Underground, London Overground and Elizabeth Line stations, and there's no need to book. Just turn up and go. That is how we're making the greener way to travel more accessible to all. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Experience. It's knowing the difference between a good deal and, well, a great deal. Right now, get 3 months free when you take out Saga Health Insurance. You get 24/7 GP access whenever you want it, and the freedom to choose your preferred private hospital with your own room should you need it. Search Saga Health Insurance for a quote today. New customers starting a policy before the 27th of November pay by monthly direct debit for the first year. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Private healthcare sounds pricey.
At Benenden Health, it's less than £16 per person per month.
Just for GP calls.
For a 24/7 GP helpline, physio, diagnostics and more. Now, tell me.
All about my medical history.
No medical questionnaires or hidden charges. We like to call it
healthcare done different.
Spot on. Benenden Health. Healthcare done different. Fee review periodically. 6-month wait for some services. T&Cs apply. Selected surgical procedures after 6 months. 24 in Northern Ireland. UK only. Visit benenden.co.uk.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:34. At the top of today's show, we were talking about the grooming or rape gangs in London and elsewhere. Last week, we were discussing, of course, the near collapse and chaos around the government's attempts to set up a national inquiry into grooming gangs, which the victims might support. No sign of any early advance on that. And today, accusing ministers of simply wanting to kick the whole thing into the long grass, the leader of Reform, Nigel Farage, came up with his own proposal, calling for a parliamentary-led inquiry instead.
So what I want to do is to offer Parliament a chance to re-establish itself in the minds of people as a good, fair and just institution. It's time for Parliament to step up and to do its job.
Now, I thought that was a rather shrewd suggestion, and it's hard on the face of it to see what the argument against a fast parliamentary inquiry would be. But let's talk next to our political editor, Natasha Clark, about that and the continuing row over comments from Reform's Sarah Pochin as well. We'll come on to Sarah Pochin in a moment. But first of all, that proposal, it was meant to be helpful, sounding helpful. Is it a game he's playing here, or is this a new Nigel Farage, as it were?
Oh, I think with Nigel Farage, there's probably always a little bit of slightly different intent behind the comments, right?
He wanted a national inquiry. He got a national inquiry, but actually he could say, no, I haven't got a national inquiry. It's fallen apart again. And in the rubble of that, something new has to change. Something new has to happen.
That's his exact argument today. And of course, you do remember that he did spend most of the first half of this year talking exactly about why we need a national inquiry, in his words, into grooming gangs. The government obviously finally did agree to one over the summer. But as you say, it has now totally all but fallen apart. We don't have a chair. We don't even have any names in the running for a chair. We've had several victims drop out, including Ellie Ann Reynolds, who was at that press conference with Nigel Farage today, a survivor. I asked her, is there anything that would make you return to that inquiry? She said she wouldn't touch it again with a barge pole. She was incredibly powerful listening to her.
It does sound that it's pretty much dead, I have to say.
Yes, so Nigel Farage's bright idea today, he said he's meeting with the Commons Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, today to propose Parliament use extraordinary powers to investigate the scandal. He basically said that this would be a lot quicker. He said that victims could get their justice quicker. And he basically said that it should be down to MPs. They are the elected representatives. Yeah. However, tonight, in the last few hours, the government have basically dismissed it, saying we're already getting on with our own inquiry. And Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has said this is another rushed proposal from Reform. They say that they basically don't believe that this commission can compel witnesses. And she says it could even harm critical prosecutions too. So really not something that there is cross-party consensus on tonight.
They've come out very, very quickly against that. Maybe one day they will regret it, because if the Labour Party the government can't get the official inquiry back on track and back moving ahead quite quickly, victims all around the country are going to say, well, the system has failed us. And in those circumstances, to have turned down a parliamentary inquiry may look a little bit silly.
Yes, but I think on the other hand, the other argument is, well, actually, if you do put it in the hand of MPs, does that not open it up to, political bias, as it were? Baroness Gohir has been quite clear. She is obviously the woman that's helping Sir Keir Starmer to try and get this inquiry back on track. She thinks it needs to be an independent inquiry, and many of the MPs that I was speaking to today do genuinely believe that whatever Baroness Gohir recommends, and she is searching for a new chair at the moment, they believe that that's exactly the right way to go.
Quick word about Sarah Pochin, if one. Nigel Farage described her comments about black and brown faces in TV adverts as being ugly, but said that it wasn't deliberate racism and he'd be taking no action.
Yeah, absolutely. And, no inquiry being launched, no investigation being launched into Sarah Pochin, rather. No, she's had a dressing down from him over the weekend. That was pretty clear. But I asked him, well, actually, you say that Sarah Pochin didn't intend to be racist with her comments. Does that mean that she and her comments were not racist? He essentially told me, yes, that is the case, that she was not intending to be racist, and therefore people make mistakes. So if you don't mean to be
racist, you can't be racist.
Well, that seems to me to be completely illogical from Nigel Farage, because if that were the case, then I don't think a lot of people who say racist things would be considered racist at all. So quite confusing from Nigel Farage today.
There is a discussion point for everybody listening at home. Thank you very much indeed, Natasha. And now to a man who's represented victims at the independent inquiry, Richard Scorer, Head of Abuse, Law and Public Inquiries at Slater and Gordon. Richard, thanks for joining us again. Can I ask, first of all, for your reaction to the Nigel Farage proposal tonight?
Well, there are a couple of things on this, really. I mean, first of all,
I welcome anything that involves more cooperation between politicians on this. We've had quite an unseemly party political battle over the past few months, and that's not been good for survivors who want to see positive forward movement on this. So I welcome anything that promotes better cooperation amongst politicians. However, I don't believe that this proposal, I haven't seen all of the detail of it, but I don't believe that realistically this proposal could be a proper substitute for a proper independent statutory inquiry. And I think there's a reference to Nigel Farage talking about doing this all in a couple of months. I'm afraid that that betrays a lack of understanding of the level of detail that an inquiry would have to go into if it was going to do this properly, to be honest.
And are you concerned about the apparent almost divvying up of victims? Because we've got, as it were, the victims who've walked out, one of whom was on the platform with Nigel Farage at the Reform press conference. And then you've got the other victims who he suggested were in many cases not the victims of Asian grooming gangs, but of other kinds of sexual exploitation. Is there a danger of, as it were, dividing people up into kind of good or bad victims, or useful or unuseful victims, or left or right victims, that kind of thing?
Well, there's of course a danger of that. I mean, what I've got to say, though, is that, from my perspective as somebody who represents victims of grooming gangs, victims of that particular crime are clear that they do not want to see a watered-down inquiry. They want to see a very focused inquiry that addresses the issues in the Casey audit.
So to that extent, Nigel Farage was right. Nigel Farage was right on that particular point.
Well, I think on that point, that is certainly the view of survivors, but whether his parliamentary commission is the right way to achieve that, I think I would probably differ on that.
All right, Richard, thank you very much indeed for helping me out this evening on that. Now, the tangled tale of the collapsed trial against 2 alleged Chinese spies in Parliament continued this afternoon, when all of the key figures from inside Whitehall were giving evidence to MPs. Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins, and the Cabinet Secretary Chris Wormald were all there. But how serious has this whole question of Chinese spying in Parliament become? I'm joined now by Lord Beamish, the former Labour MP Kevin Jones, and now Chair of Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee. Lord Beamish, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Complicated story, as I say, but we've got the two sides, the DPP and the Deputy National Security Advisor. They both accused the other, as it were, sort of by proxies, of being responsible for the collapse of the trial. Have we learned anything new this afternoon?
No, I don't. You have. The ISC, which I chair, we're conducting our own investigation around the intelligence. We've seen the initial intelligence and briefing, so we fully understand the background to the case. We will then be obviously asking for more documentation and calling witnesses. And unlike a select committee, we have statutory powers to do that, so people can't refuse to appear before us. So I think that's where we're at. We're not going to look, obviously, at the role of the Crown Prosecution Service. That falls outside our remit, but we're clearly looking at how that intelligence was used. Now it actually led to, one, the initial prosecution, and then what changed.
Kevin, I think up and down the country, people are scratching their heads and saying, yeah, but is this really serious? I mean, some of the things that these two guys were alleged to have passed to the Chinese were indeed kind of gossip you could have snipped out of yesterday's newspapers, and no more serious than that. What is your impression of the seriousness of Chinese penetration of Parliament and politics?
Well, I mean, I can't say what I've seen because obviously it's classified, but it clearly passed the threshold to become the prosecution being laid in the first place. And I think what you've got to understand, and we covered it in our 2023 report on China, is that they are a sophisticated threat. They are across all sectors, politics, economics, academia, and, this is an organisation with upwards of 2 million individuals working for them.
We use the term national security all the time, but it seems from this area that national security is should be quite widely defined. In other words, if there is a British company making some kind of new materials for windmill blades and their secrets are stolen by the Chinese or somebody else, that is a question for national security. If the Chinese know pretty much what's going to happen at the next cabinet reshuffle, that might be national security as well.
Well, it's what our report outlined is the Chinese take what they call a whole systems approach, which covers, as I say, from economics right through to academia politics. And what we found in 2003 was that the previous government's policy was a little bit, disorganised We had the so-called China framework in 2018. That was replaced by the integrated review in 2021, which described Russia as an acute and direct threat, but I think described China at the time as a symptomatic competitor.
Yes, we've had competitor, we've
between...
had threat, we've had all sorts of phrases used. Will your committee come up with its own phrase in the end about how you regard China?
Oh no, we were very clear. People can read the Open Report, our 2023 report. China is a threat to our national security on a whole host of areas.
So if it had been you guys and not the Deputy National Security Advisor advising this court case, it wouldn't have collapsed?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying that, but the evidence is there. But then you've also got to, like all governments have done, and is balance the idea that China is, our I think fifth largest trading partner and the second largest economy in the world. Those people are saying that you can just ignore China and pull the bedclothes over and ignore them. I think is a bit naive.
Behind all of this, the politics are an accusation from opposition parties that this government has deliberately collapsed the trial in order to keep a good commercial relationship, a good political relationship with China, on whom we in part depend. Have you seen any evidence for that?
Well, no, and I think the point is it's a balancing act for this government as it was for the last Conservative government in terms of trying to ensure that we have diplomatic relations with China, economic and trading relations, but also, as I said in an article I wrote a few months ago, you have to have your eyes wide open when you're dealing with China. And it's I always get a bit annoyed about individuals who are now in Parliament shouting, saying, we have nothing to do with China at all. Some of these were in the golden years of the Cameron-Osborne area, which was, clearly a mistake.
It's a devilishly tricky balance to achieve. Lord Beamish, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to me. A British charity that seeks to protect indigenous groups around the world has warned that the rising trend of influencers who try to make contact with the tribes for clicks are putting them at mortal risk. More on that in a few minutes, with the time now 6:46.
Coming up at 7, Ian Dale leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
I'm telling you, raise taxes, that's how.
Cut spending, less waste, more sense.
Move north, get more for your money. Until winter hits your heating bill. Fair.
Up to 9.13% annual return. We all agree that's strong.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Cufflink. Auto-invest property-backed from £500. Visit cufflink.com. That's Kuflink. Register your interest today. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules apply to IF ISAs and may be subject to change. Cufflink is authorised and regulated by the FCA.
Amazon offers term time working to their employees, like Anton, who's home to look after his daughters during their holidays.
Hello?
To him, this is the best sound in the world. Actually, maybe that's the best sound of all. Now that's term time working, offered at Amazon. 10 weeks off guaranteed per year. Mix of paid holiday and unpaid time off. Conditions apply.
For anyone needing assistance when travelling with TfL, such as people with visual or mobility impairments, our Turn Up and Go service has staff on hand to help. It's available at all London Underground, London Overground and Elizabeth Line stations, and there's no need to book. Just turn up and go. That is how we're making the greener way to travel more accessible to all. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:48. Now, we've spoken on the show recently about the positive contribution made by influencers. Let's now talk about the darker side. According to Survival International, there are 196 ancient tribes who choose to remain isolated from modern civilization. And many of them are in danger of being wiped out in the next decade by YouTube influencers desperate for clicks. They want to contact them, but that means disease. Caroline Pearce, CEO of Survival International, spoke to me a little earlier.
Yes, I mean, we've been working on these issues since 1969. We have researchers with in-depth knowledge
spend a lot of time in these countries, a lot of time in particular with neighbouring indigenous communities. They are generally the people who know best who is in the forest, who is not in the forest. And pulling on all those sources, as well as all the anthropologists, government agents and so on we work with, we've come to this total.
And there's been a lot of coverage of the groups in the Amazon being pressed back on and indeed obliterated by logging and by modern farming and the mineral extraction going on there. But actually there's also a lot of groups around the coasts of India and on islands near India.
There are two groups in the Indian Ocean, the Sentinelese and the Shompen. There are other groups there's the Honggana Manyawa on Halmahera Island in Indonesia. There are others in Indonesia and in West Papua. We're very, very concerned about them too. And you're right that they tend to get less recognition as being uncontacted Indigenous peoples than those in the Amazon do.
What do we know about them?
We know more about some than others. In most of those cases, the Shompen, the Honggana Manyawa and others, they have contacted Indigenous relatives. Either groups that have split off some time ago, or sometimes even formerly uncontacted people who have been contacted within their lifetime, who can therefore tell us quite a bit. In the case of the Sentinelese on North Sentinel Island, we know very, very little. They live alone on their own island. They warn off anyone who comes near. They are not interested in having contact. There have been past contact attempts over the last 140 years. By the Indian government and then by others, and they have made quite clear that they are happy on their own island. So we don't know what they call themselves, we don't know their language, we don't know anything.
And in the past, the kind of people who have tried to contact them, presumably therefore bringing dangerous diseases and other threats, have been missionaries, they've been adventurers, so-called, but now we have a new generation of YouTubers desperate for clicks, desperate to monetize whatever they do in front of their cameras, and they're the new danger. Is that right?
They're a new danger, certainly. I don't want to play down the existing dangers.
Sure.
Extractive industries are still huge, but the danger from these sort of would-be social media influencers is that they risk exposing uncontacted peoples to diseases to which they have no immunity. People who live in isolation, by definition, have not developed immunity to diseases that are common elsewhere, and dying from vast numbers of people, the majority of the community dying from a cold, the flu, measles, has happened repeatedly, and risks, if one of these people succeeds in making any kind of contact, it risks happening again. Luckily, at the moment, they mostly seem to be, chancers who are staging encounters rather than anything else. But we do think it's really a serious danger to be averted.
Because obviously it's not just a serious danger, but it's a serious danger being done for effectively trivial reasons. It's making uncontacted people who have their precious isolated lifestyles a kind of entertainment then to be monetized on, I don't know, YouTube or TikTok or whatever.
I mean, it's a very modern form of neocolonialism. All the incursion on uncontacted people lands are colonialism, but this is another one that says we think our entertainment is more important than your ability to live as you want in your own life, more important than your human rights, more important even than your survival. One of our Indigenous contacts, talked a lot about this in terms of dignity. Uncontacted peoples also have dignity. They are not there to provide entertaining pictures of peoples with spear, nor are they there to provide an exciting holiday story. They are there living their own lives on their own land, in their homes, and risking invading that is not only an affront to that dignity, it also risks killing them.
Because they are very vulnerable to Western diseases, as were the Native American people before the arrival of Europeans.
Exactly. And there was a lot from the sort of middle of the 20th century onwards. There were many attempts by the Brazilian government to contact uncontacted Indigenous peoples, and it was their own experts who eventually said, we cannot do this safely. No matter how many medical teams we take in, people are still dying. And that's why Brazil developed this no contact policy from 1987 onwards, because all the experts who were doing it, really from high-minded reasons, really with good intent, still with medical teams could not prevent vast numbers of people from dying, and that's what these would-be influencers are risking without any of the same protections in place.
We all live in a slightly shallow media culture these days. So is it important to have people like the actor Richard Gere, who I think has got behind your campaigns, partly because of his experience of living alongside former Native American groups in the US and realising what had nearly happened to them? They too had nearly been entirely exterminated.
Yes, and in fact, a leader of that same people that lived near Richard Gere, he commented on this when we shared some of our findings with him. He said, "This is what happened to us." So yes, I do think that's what motivated him to get involved. He's actually been a supporter of survival for more than 30 years. He has he's not just doing this as a fly-by-night thing. He has a genuine long-term commitment, and we're very, grateful for anyone who's using their platform to speak out and say, these are people who deserve to have their rights respected, who deserve to have their dignity respected, who deserve to have their choices respected.
Yes, we talk endlessly about biodiversity, but there is human diversity as well. Caroline Pearce, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC tonight.
Thank you, Andrew.
From 1967 until the beginning of 2000, gay people were banned from the armed forces. Thousands of them were investigated and then forced out. Now there's a national memorial honouring them, and earlier today King Charles laid flowers at the site in Staffordshire. I'm joined now by Peter Gibson, CEO of Fighting with Pride. Thank you very much indeed, Peter, for joining us. First of all, I said just now 1967 was when the gay ban started. Was there no gay ban before that? And if not, why not?
Well, there was a gay ban for men, certainly in the armed forces before 1967. We work on 1967 because that is the year that civilian homosexuality was decriminalised.
I see.
But it continued in the military from 1967, and it's arguable it disproportionately affected women after 1967 as well, due to the numbers affected by the ban between 67 and 2000.
And these are stories of people who served their country bravely and well, but were kind of, I guess, always looking over their shoulder, waiting for the tap on the shoulder and the warning.
These people lived their lives in secret, hid their true selves, were not allowed to lead authentic lives. And yes, many of them served their country with great distinction and pride in the service that they gave to the respective service that they belonged to. It's taken 20 years from the ban being lifted in 2000 to the establishment of Fighting with Pride. The founders of the charity, Craig, Caroline and Patrick, launched a campaign in 2020 to bring about some reparations, and we were blessed with the report by the very late Lord Etherton, which was published in 2023. That led to a series of recommendations from Lord Etherton, including an apology from the government, which the then Prime Minister delivered in July 23. But one of Lord Etherton's recommendations, recommendation number 17 of 49, all of which were accepted by both the last government and the current government, was the establishment of a memorial to the LGBT armed forces community, both veteran and serving, and that is what was dedicated today by the King at the National Memorial Arboretum.
So how important was it that the King himself was there and met people and presumably said some words?
Well, I can tell you the deep, profound sense of awe that the most senior person in the British Armed Forces was there. A member of the royal family was there. The King was there. Was really profoundly felt by those people who, we're working with some veterans who were dismissed as far back as the 1960s. They have sought justice and fairness for many, many decades. So, yes, the King's attendance today was hugely significant. But I think there's a wider point to the King's attendance today, not just for the LGBT veteran community and the LGBT serving community, but the LGBT community as a whole.
So it gives people, the National Arboretum, I think is where the memorial is, it gives people somewhere to go, remember their loved ones and have a quiet moment.
Indeed it does.
Peter Gibson, thank you so much for talking to LBC tonight. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you'd like them. You can pause, you can rewind live radio, and you can listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Henry Riley, but right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
It's little wonder when the system has been brought to its knees that errors like this happen.
The Justice Secretary says the release from prison of the Epping asylum seeker sex offender was the result of human error, but also the result of that old chestnut, 14 years of Tory failure. From everything we've heard so far, who do you blame for the utter chaos we've seen over the weekend? On Cross Question from 8, the Liberal Democrat Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper, the Conservative Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois, the Labourist website editor Emma Burnell, and the entrepreneur and commentator Jamila Robertson. Then at 9, as new laws to make England's social housing safer come into